If you don't know who I am, my name's Coleman. I'm a writer. That's pretty much the only thing we're good at. Now, the topic of this night, the Crush Gala, is a little bit challenging, a little bit embarrassing, and a little shameful. And my story will tell you exactly why. I had a crush. Maybe deep down I still have one. It started back when I was about 8. It's a slightly embarrassing, total little girl crush, but not for somebody of my age should have been aware of. It was definitely not sexual. Hell, I don't even remember knowing what sex was. I don't imagine having had something resembling sexual feelings or sexual identity at 8 years old. Me being me now, I'm more than a little embarrassed of this crush. Earlier, when I was more nervous of what you might think of me, I would perhaps not have admitted it. My first crush in general and my first literary crush are the same crush. And I still feel that crush in the back of my mind when I reach that direction with my feelings. Even though it does not match my sexuality, and a part of me simultaneously screams, "Ew!" My first crush was from Aragorn, son of Arathorn, heir of Isildur, and I know I'm not alone in that feeling. Now I know for certain there are people in that room with the same childhood crush. If you too, when reading The Lord of the Rings, developed a crush on the man described by Bilbo Baggins through Tolkien with the line, "All that is gold does not glitter," you have my permission to admit it. You also have my permission to not admit it. People like that don't really exist. And it's okay to have a shameful crush on a fictitious character. Well, I think it is. Whatever. I came upon my first copy of Lord of the Rings completely by accident. As a child, I rummaged through the garbage tip of the Forester settlement where I grew up so often that my parents probably would have freaked out if they'd known. There, I stumbled upon a copy of the 1968 single-volume paperback. It was a bit ragged. It was the size and form factor of a house brick. It was the first fiction book I ever read that wasn't a children's book, and the first book I can remember reading. Your first book is like your first kiss. Everyone after that is compared to the first. For a moment, allow serendipity to wash over you. There's no way to completely sure, but I imagine that discovering that book in a rubbish tip was a catalyst that made me the word nerd I am today. I read it until it fell apart. Until I had to ask my mum to cover it in blue contact film because that was the only colour we had. And I was forced to reattach several pages with masking tape. At one point, it fell apart into 3 pieces, but unfortunately not 3 neat volumes. I'd never experienced proper books or bookishness before, and the idea of acquiring another copy of that novel never occurred to me. That child, that 8-year-old me, fell in love with Aragorn for his strength and his character arc, although I didn't know what that was back then. I fell in love with this impossible imaginary man, this great hero who went from homelessness, from sleeping in ditches and under bushes, to the kingship purely because of goodness and fate. Oh, and destiny. Oh, and his ancestors' broken sword. Look, unlike Michael, I'm not afraid to take my jacket off. And you'll see, I really love Aragorn. That's why I'm wearing his sword on my T-shirt. But I'll ask you a question. Who the fuck carries a broken piece of sword instead of, a sword? In the novel, when he sets out to lead the hobbits from danger to Rivendell, he's carrying a broken sword. How fucking stupid is that? He tells them he'll protect them, but doesn't have a usable weapon. And I didn't understand then that accident of birth was a very poor basis for choosing a leader. I had not yet developed my hatred of monarchies. I didn't understand that kings should not be chosen on the basis of, I have the sword of my ancestor. Or, oh look, I can name an ancestor, woo! Or look at me, I totally smacked those orcs. Or peasants, or blackfellas. I didn't understand back then that the kingdom of Rohan, the allies of Aragorn's kingdom of Gondor, were colonisers who had kicked an indigenous people off their land. The traditional owners of that land, later called Rohan, were called the wild men in the novel. People in history have called my people nasty things too, and they still do. Gondor, the last kingdom of the Dunedain, Aragon's people, gave that land to Rohan, like if, the English had given Australia to the Vikings instead of stealing it themselves. When that occurred to me about my favourite book, it broke my heart. Gondor were not good guys. Not from a post-colonial point of view anyway. Gondor, Numenor, Aragon were all total bastards. I have to face facts. A childhood crush that helped define me in so many ways is also deeply embarrassing. And maybe that's what life is about. The good, the bad, the embarrassing crushes, the things we are ashamed of. They are a part of us, as much as all the good things are. We are defined by the good and the bad, by the things that make us proud and the things that shame us, and sometimes they are the same things. If nothing else, it was my love of Aragorn, my love of the Lord of the Rings, that kick-started my long-term relationship with books. Without my shameful first crush, I would perhaps not be standing here talking on this stage. So maybe I shouldn't be ashamed after all. Thank you.
Visit wheelercentre.com for the best in books, writing and ideas from Melbourne, Australia and the world.